Surprise.
He did the mash.
He did the monster mash.
The monster mash.
It was a graveyard smash.
We'll get back to our Monster Mash in just a moment, but before we do that, I wanted to take a medium-depth detour into what random does and how we can bring random into our programs and how to use it, along with a few powers that may come in handy this week. Like any other module, I showed you this with JSON in the last video. We need to import it into our program to use it because we don't always need random numbers or random choosers. So at the top of my program, I'm going to bring it in by saying import, again, import keyword, space, and then the module name that I want to bring in, which in this case is just random. Now, one of the things that random can do for us is it allows us to choose from lists very effectively. And to do that, I have brought myself in a list, and it is our typical cat names list, of course, with 5 of my favorite names for my particular cat. So I'm going to run that just so that I have that in memory as well. Now, in order to choose from this list, we're going to use a method called choice, which I will tell you takes one parameter, and that parameter is the data structure, in this case a list, to choose from. So I'm able to say something like random.choice, cat names, and I should get myself a random cat name. Now, this is a productive method, but also notice it's not really modifying anything. It's going and fetching a particular value from the list, a random value from the list. It's not really modifying anything. So again, we're here working with our objects to do things to or with our particular brought in module. So I'm going to say random name equals random.choice, random being the module that I'm using here, random.method, random name, and I should get a random name for my list. And I do. And if I run this each time over and over again, you'll notice that I keep getting random names, and I only choose particularly one thing from the list at a time. So random.choice allows me to go into a list and randomly choose from that list, up to the number of items in it, some random choice. Now, if I wanted to get more than one choice, I actually have the ability to do that as well. I could use the sample names variable to capture the output of something called random.sample. And here I can tell you that sample takes 2 parameters. It takes the thing to sample from, cat names, and something called the K value, or just the number of items that you want to choose. I'm going to choose 3. So you can read this as random sample from cat names, 3 items, or 3 items from that list. If I print sample names, I should get my sample, and I do. And again, I can run this multiple times, and I can grab different slices of that particular list. Now, one thing that's wonderful about sample is that it doesn't repeat. There are going to always be unique names that come out of this list into my new structure. Notice it gives me back a list. I can, of course, change this. If I take down to 1, I still get a list. It's just of 1 element. And I also could take it up to 4 and get 4 of them. I could take it up to the length of the list, or I could take it up to too much. If I try to ask for too many values, more values than there actually are in the list, it's going to give me an error. So I can go up to the maximum of len cat names. And this might be a good way to actually just get a randomization of the list, to shake the list up. We saw that previously with another thing that we saw, which is random.shuffle, which I want to remind you about. Random.shuffle cat names doesn't actually give back a value. We saw that with some folks who were trying to catch it in the previous grocery exercise. Random.shuffle essentially just shakes up my list. So random.sample len of the list will do the same thing here, but it won't do it permanently. Random.shuffle is a permanent in-place change. So if I shuffle it and I print cat names, my list is forever changed to the new order that I see here. So that's the difference between choice, sample, and shuffle. Choice just chooses 1 from the list. Sample chooses K items, or whatever I want to, however many I want to choose, up to the limit of the number of items in the list. And then shuffle, again, shuffles up my list. But there's actually one more power I want to have a look at, which is one that a lot of you are probably thinking, well, random should be able to do. It should be able to generate random numbers. And I can do that using the randint method of the particular module. So I can say something like D6, and for my folks out there that play Dungeons & Dragons, this is for you, my 6-sided die. For those of you who don't, it's just a dice with 6 sides. We know it goes 1 through 6. We can say D6 that we're going to roll is random.randint 1 to 6. So we can say from some number 1 to another number 6, generate a random number between those things, and I'm going to print it out just to prove I'm doing it. I get a 4, I get a 1, I get a 5, I get a 3. Now we can make this upper bound anything we want it to be 10. We can make it 1,000. We can even make this a negative number, negative 1,000 to positive 1,000, and we get all of our random numbers between those. Because again, it takes 2 particular arguments, accepts 2 parameters, both of which are integers. And so I can get a random number between any range of integers that I want to get as well. All of these are very useful for us and will be useful to us in this week. However, we're going to be using choice as we return to our monster mash in order to choose those random values from our given lists that we've already set up. And here I am back in my monster mash. I removed the 2 print statements that I ended the last session with because I don't really need them. I'm going to do something else here. But I know that I need to start using some powers of random. I'm going to use random.choice in order to choose randomly from my 2 lists that I've put together here. One thing I know that I need to do before I even do anything else is I need to make sure that I have access to the powers of random. So just like importing JSON, I need to import my random. So I go to the top of my program. Just beneath import JSON, I'm going to say import random. And that makes sure that whenever I run my program, I bring these powers right in immediately. I don't have to worry about it. I just set and forget it. And I'm able to access all the powers of random that I want to. Now, I know I'm going to use choice. I said that just a little bit earlier. But that seems like just a few too many characters to type every time. I know I'm going to use it more than once, so I'm already starting to think that this might be a good candidate for a function. And I'm going to make one. I'm going to call it choose1, which is a little bit shorter than random.choice every time. And it's going to take 1 parameter, which is the thing that I want to choose from. So just under load file, I'm going to create a new function called def choose1. So define keyword, then choose1, the name of the function. I'm going to take 1 parameter called data. Again, what you call it here doesn't really matter. Whatever you pass to it is going to temporarily take on that identity. It's going to become that name. And I'm going to return the value of random.choice from data. So a short function that seems like it's not really that consequential, but it's actually going to save us a fair bit of time. And I find myself back down in the main. And the reason why is I'm going to test out my new function. So if I've given myself a function that's supposed to save myself some time, I'm going to print product of choose1 descriptions. What I should be able to get here is I should be able to get just a random description from my list. I'm going to do the same thing for monsters. So choose1 monsters. And again, I should get just a random choice from my monsters list. So I'm going to go ahead and Python the sandbox.py file and see what I get. So the prediction is I'm going to get 2 things. I'm going to get a description and I'm going to get a monster. And I get a negative golem, whatever that is. Or a sensible werewolf. All right, I can do that. Childlike specter, uncertain Valkyrie. As you can start to see, these are going to be randomized. They're going to be unpredictable, which is part of what gives this program its variety. It's fun. We're going to see that as we add on more to our monster mash, it's going to gain just a little bit more of that variety, and we're going to be able to see that actually we can do quite a bit with just a little data. But as it is my habit, it seems in these videos, I'm going to remove what I just did there because that's not exactly where I want to do it. In between the break of filming videos, I thought, well, it might be fun if I were to add on just a little bit at the beginning of the sentence so I could give myself a little bit more variety or a little bit more of something to choose from. And so I'm going to create a list called stems that contains things like, oh no, I'm running away from a sensible werewolf. Things like that. So we're going to create a function to do that, which is going to allow us to pass some parameters to, in fact, the list of descriptions and the monsters, and then combine it with a stem, return that back to our main, and then we can call our monster mash complete. So I'm going to create this function just under choose1. I'm going to call it the monster mash. This is actually the thing that we are actually going to really mash monsters in. I'm going to, again, give it 2 parameters. I'm going to take the descriptions and then the monsters. You can make it monsters descriptions. It doesn't really matter as long as you call it correctly when you are using your main function, when you're calling it from there. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to think about, what might my stems look like? They might be some sentences that I could put in a list. I gave you an example 1 already. I'm probably thinking of just a few more, but it's a Halloween miracle. Oh, you did that? Oh, that's so nice. Thank you. You see that? He did a nice thing. Oh no, I'm Canada. I'm helpless when facing. Run for your lives. Only Ulysses can save me from the... I have my 10 stems. You might have 3 or 4. I'd say at least 3 or 4 just to get enough variety to make it interesting and to be able to choose something, which is the next step. We're going to do all of our choices. So using our choose one function, if we scroll up, we see we have our choose one that does our choices for us. I have descriptions, monsters, and stems all in this particular function. So I'm going to say my descriptor is the choose one of descriptions. My monster is my choose one of monsters. And my stem is my choose one of stems. The last thing I need to do is actually send it back, and I'm going to send it back in the form of an F string that combines all of these things together into one statement. My F string is going to be my stem, the thing to start my sentence with, then my descriptor, then my monster. I'm going to end it with an exclamation mark because that's a little bit scarier than something like a question mark, like I'm running away from a splendid zombie? Not the best. So an exclamation mark, that indicates terror. So we are going to go down to our main and terror ourselves by printing the outcome of monster mash and send up my 2 parameters that I need to use here, my descriptions, then my monsters. So descriptions, monsters, yours may be different. That was weird though. You said like to terrorize ourselves. That's not what you want to say. It's kind of dumb. I have my 10 stems. Now you may have 3 or 4. You might take some time to write some. 3 or 4 would be the minimum, I would say, just to get enough variety that your program is interesting and that you can make a choice from it, which is the next thing we're going to do. We're going to make choices from our various lists. We're going to use our choose one function to do that. The first one that I'm going to use is my descriptor to get my descriptions. So descriptor equals choose one descriptions. My monster is going to be choose one from monsters. And my stem is going to be choose one from stems. Choose one, stems. And I need to return something back because right now it's not really going anywhere. I'm not showing anybody or anything the product of my choices. So I'm going to return an F string. It starts off with stem, descriptor just to describe my monster, monster, and an exclamation mark because that indicates true fright, true terror. It's better than a question mark. I'm running away from a splendid zombie? Not quite the same effect. So we're going to use our exclamation mark here and say descriptor, monster, stem. We've got all that put together. So the last thing we need to do, the absolute last thing to make our monster mash complete is print the outcome of monster mash and pass your arguments the same as you are accepting them in your function, minus descriptions, monsters. Yours may be flipped or named something different. Make sure you're just being consistent with what you've defined, descriptions, monsters. And if I've done everything right, absolutely right, I should be able to head on over to my terminal and have a look at what happens. So let's go. If I python sandbox.py, cross your fingers for me, this should print out something that we are terrified of. An average satyr. Average? Really? That's all there is to this week. So we learned about object-oriented programming this week, which is not necessarily something new, though you haven't really put name to what you've been doing yet, and that's what this is. We can do things to objects, and we can do things with objects. And we saw those with objects this week. We saw JSON and we saw random, and we're going to work more with those as we deepen our skills. But of course, we also brought everything together. This is kind of a cumulative week. This exercise doesn't feel big, but it really is. If you take into account that this really encompasses nearly everything we have done this semester, we were able to make something small, novel, and fun, just with a little bit of data and some extra knowledge. So I look forward to seeing you this week to work through some more problems and to learn some more about how we can use our programs for good or evil.